Tell us a little bit about what the U.S. is doing there.
To start, maybe to set out the strategy or the problem the U.S. is trying to address. The key issue from the perspective of the U.S. government is not smartphones or PCs, which are a major use case for many chips, but defense systems. And U.S. military systems are as dependent on semiconductors as any other part of modern life. And if you look at what defense strategists, whether in Washington or in other countries, are projecting for the future of military systems, they're planning to become even more reliant on semiconductors over time. And if you envision, for example, an advanced drone flying through a contested battle space, it's going to need a lot of processing power, a lot of memory, a lot of signals processing, and all that means advanced chips. So militaries will become more dependent on chips as time passes, and the United States believes that its primary advantage relative to rivals like China is in computing power. If you look, for example, at military expansion plans in China versus the U.S., there's really no doubt that China is going to be building more ships, more missiles, more airplanes, more drones than the United States. And so the U.S. has to find a way, if it wants to keep its military edge, to match this quantity with edge in quality. And the Pentagon is betting that the qualitative edge that it's going to best be able to maintain over time is in computing power, which is why it's trying to make sure that China doesn't have access to the most advanced chips and make sure that the U.S. retains access and even increases its ability to produce advanced semiconductors.
And so to maintain that advantage, it seems like it's taking two broad categories of steps. On the one hand, it's barring exports to China of American-made equipment that produce advanced chips. And then on the other hand, it's also made rules that would bar U.S. nationals and U.S. green card holders from supporting the production of advanced chips in China. And that second one has really caught a lot of attention, because if you prevent Americans from supporting these key portions of the China chip-making industry, that's a huge part of the intellectual know-how pulled out of that industry all at once. So expand on that a little bit. What are these measures doing?
The key goal of measures is to prevent China from being able to access advanced chips, especially the types of advanced chips that undertake artificial intelligence operations in data centers. And so the U.S. has banned the transfer to China of certain types of chips that are designed in the U.S., made largely in Taiwan, and used for data center purposes when data centers are undertaking AI applications. So that's the first step in the export controls. But then to make sure that China can't domestically produce this type of chips, the U.S. has implemented a sweeping set of restrictions to prevent Chinese chip-making facilities from acquiring the types of machine tools that you actually need to produce chips. And a couple of U.S. firms play a dominant role in the production of these machine tools, and the other machine tools that you need to make chips come from U.S. allies like the Netherlands and Japan. So China is almost completely dependent on importing chip-making tools from the U.S., Japan, and the Netherlands. And as a result, it needs to either access these tools or is unable to produce advanced chips. And the third set of the restrictions that is particularly important is, as you mentioned, the personnel restrictions, making it illegal for American citizens or American companies to do business of any sort with listed Chinese chip firms, whether it's work for them or supply them or fix their machines. A whole set of activities has been banned. And so now, from the perspective of U.S. law, it's comparable to working with Iranian missile designers or the North Korean government as it is to work with certain Chinese chip firms. And the goal is to stop progress in the Chinese chip industry in terms of getting closer to cutting-edge production, to guarantee that China can't domestically create the types of advanced AI chips that the U.S. is currently barring it from importing.
And will these measures succeed in that regard? How big of an impact will this have on the Chinese chip industry? Chris Miller.
Well, it's pretty clear that in the short run, they're going to have a dramatic impact. The reality is that although China is a big economy and it's a big player in the electronics industry, in electronics, its primary impact is in the assembly part of the business. And when it comes to producing chips, China produces hardly any cutting-edge chips. and all of the chips that it produces are dependent on the import of machine tools and software from the United States, as well as a couple other allied countries. So there's really no easy way to get around these types of restrictions, and at least for the next half decade, probably the next decade, China will really struggle to make much progress towards domestically producing the types of tools that it needs. After that point, it's harder to be certain, but for the next couple of years, China's going to face really severe issues. And the goal of the strategy from the perspective of the U.S. government is that as the Chinese are held back by these restrictions, the U.S. and the rest of the world chip industry, Taiwan, South Korea, etc., will continue moving forward at the exponential growth rate predicted by Moore's law. And so what today is already meaningful, though fairly narrow gap between U.S. and Chinese capabilities will grow dramatically over the next couple of years, thereby opening up a gap in computing capabilities that the U.S. military hopes to exploit to retain its qualitative edge.
It does seem like a bit of an extreme step, though. I mean, there's obviously tensions between the U.S. and a lot of other countries in the world, but hypothetically, the U.S. is the free trade country. You know, in general, we are the ones that are boosting free trade around the world, hypothetically. And so to really shut that off with China in this key industry seems like a major escalation. Am I reading that right? This seems pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I think it is a big shift in U.S. prioritization away from trade, away from trying to integrate China economically.